I'm Lucy Tyndall, 52, and I spent 29 years inside rooms in the United States Coast Guard, where nobody was ever supposed to know my name. For 24 of those years, I let my own family believe I was just the daughter who joined the boat boys instead of going to law school. But when an Army captain blocked me at the wrong elevator at NSA Fort Meade one Tuesday morning and called me sweetheart, a 4-inch badge screen did the thing my mouth never had. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who decided who you were in a half second? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You are not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you are tuning in from. And if you have ever had to stand in a hallway and let the building speak for you, hit that like button and subscribe. My father loved me. I am going to say that first because everything else I am going to tell you about him is going to sound like the opposite, and it is not. He loved me. He just did not know how to love what I became. He grew up in a small house on the west side of Cleveland with 2 brothers and a father who worked at the steel mill in Lorraine. He was 26 when I was born, in March of 1974. He had been an assistant manager at the Parma branch of Allerton Hardware for 3 years, and he was already saving in a Christmas Club account at Society National for the regional manager job he believed he would get by 1980. He got it in 1980, 6 months ahead of his own schedule. He kept the canceled deposit slips in a manila envelope in the basement workshop. I have seen them. The Cleveland I grew up in was small in the way a single street can be small. We lived in a brick bungalow in Old Brooklyn, 6 blocks from the public library and 4 blocks from the public pool on Pearl Road. My mother, Maeve, was a parish secretary at St. Leo the Great. She kept her own ledger, in pencil, of who in the parish owed casserole dishes to whom. My sister Pippa came in 1977. The 2 of us slept in the same bedroom for 12 years, with twin beds and a strip of yellow tape down the middle of the rug that we both took seriously. The Saturday inventory ride-alongs started when I was 6. My father drove a wood-paneled station wagon to the Parma branch on the first Saturday of every month and let me come along. I would walk the aisles with a clipboard he had cut down for me, counting boxes of 3/4-inch wood screws, and he would walk the front of the store counting tills. The aisles smelled like cedar and oil, and that particular sweet metal smell you get in a small hardware store on a winter morning. At the end of the count, he would buy me a grape soda from the backroom fridge, and he would tell me every time the same sentence. Lucy, you have a sharp head for numbers. Don't let anybody tell you different. I remembered the sentence on the Saturday mornings in flight school in 1997, when I sat in a borrowed office at Air Station Mobile and counted down a pre-flight checklist for the 3rd time and felt my breath slow on the 3rd pass through the chart. I remembered it later, too, at NSA Fort Meade, the first morning I walked into the cryptologic group's vault as a lieutenant commander in the spring of 2006. The sentence has been with me my whole life. He gave me that sentence. It is, in a way, the first thing he ever gave me, and I keep it. The swim team was 1983. I was 9. I had passed the deep end test at the public pool that summer and refused to come out of the water until my lips went blue. The lifeguard's whistle had to call me out twice. I asked my mother if I could try out for the city team in the fall. She told me swim team was fine if it did not interfere with piano. She also told me, that same week, that girls who do too many sports end up with shoulders, and that I did not want shoulders. I did not know, at 9, that she meant it as a kindness. I know now. She was raised in a small Catholic neighborhood in Buffalo where a woman's shoulders were a kind of vocabulary, and she did not want her daughters to be misread. She was wrong, but she meant it as a kindness, and I am old enough now to keep both things in my head at the same time. The first time I said the word Coast Guard out loud in my parents' kitchen, I was 15. It was the spring of 1989. I had spent the Saturday afternoon at the Berea High School career fair, at the 3rd folding table on the left, where a petty officer first class named Dempsey had a stack of brochures and a small foam board display of a 41-foot patrol boat coming around a breakwater in heavy weather. The patrol boat was painted white and orange. The breakwater was concrete. The water around the boat was the dark green of Lake Erie in March. I took every brochure on Dempsey's table and walked home with them in my backpack, 6 blocks, and laid them out on the kitchen table while my mother was at the parish and my father was in the basement workshop. I lined them up like a hand of cards. I waited. He came up from the basement at 5:45. He saw the brochures. He looked at the foam board photograph on the top brochure the way he looked at a damaged inventory sheet. He said, Lucy, the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is for boys who can't get into the Navy. You want the service academies, you go for West Point or Annapolis. You don't go for the boat boys. Pippa was 12, sitting on the kitchen floor with her math homework, and she laughed. She said the boat boys out loud in her thin 12-year-old laugh, and I felt the floor of the kitchen tilt half an inch under my socks. I did not say anything. I gathered the brochures into a stack and slid them into my backpack and went upstairs. I did not, that afternoon, know that he was wrong about the Coast Guard. I knew about polar icebreakers from a book at the public library. I knew about maritime safety teams and law enforcement detachments because the brochures had pictures. I knew dimly that there was a cryptologic group somewhere on the East Coast that did work nobody talked about because the chief at the recruiter table had said in a low voice, "We do more than you'd think." But I did not know yet. I just knew my father was sure, and in my father's house, sure was a kind of weather. You did not argue with weather. You waited for it to pass, or you put on a coat. I kept swimming. I kept walking to the library on Saturday afternoons. I learned, slowly, by myself, the words that the chief at the recruiter table had used. I learned them the way a kid learns the names of the constellations. Alone, after dinner, by lamplight, while the people in the next room watched television. I did not show my father any of it. He was busy with the Parma branch and then with the East Side district. He taught me, in the same kitchen, how to read a balance sheet. He was a patient teacher about balance sheets. He explained debits and credits with a salt shaker and a pepper shaker and a paper napkin, and I understood him the first time. I learned to read a chart by myself on the back of his hardware store flyers with a pencil. He never asked what I was drawing. Neither did Pippa. They were busy being the people they were. So was I, although I did not know that yet. I was being the person I was going to be in the kitchen at the table while my father read the sports page and my mother managed the casseroles. The house held all of it. The house in 1989 on a side street in Old Brooklyn in March light with the brochures upstairs in my backpack and the kitchen smell of coffee on the counter was preparing me to leave it. The congressional nomination letter came in November of 1991. I was 17. I opened the manila envelope at the kitchen counter while my father made coffee at the percolator. The letter was from Representative Stokes's office. The letter said, in 2 short paragraphs, that I had been nominated to the United States Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. I read it twice. I handed it to my father. He read it. He set it down on the counter next to the percolator. He poured himself a cup of coffee. He asked in his level voice whether I had thought about Case Western for pre-law. My mother came in from the dining room and told him to be supportive. He told her he was being supportive. He was being supportive in his way. He just thought I was going to come to my senses by August. I did not come to my senses by August. I reported to Swab Summer at the Coast Guard Academy on the 2nd day of July, 1992. My father drove me. He had the rental car packed by 5 in the morning. He drove the entire 800 miles to New London without letting me touch the wheel once. We did not talk much. He had the radio on a Pittsburgh AM station for most of Pennsylvania, and then he found a Hartford talk station for the last hour. When we pulled into the parking lot outside Chase Hall, he handed me a clipboard. He had made it himself in the basement workshop, a half sheet of plywood with a binder clip at the top. On the clip, he had attached a single sheet of yellow legal paper. On the legal paper, in his neat ledger hand, were the things I might need to remember in the first week. He had written, "Iron uniform shirts the night before, and do not lose your room key, and call your mother on Sunday." At the bottom of the sheet he had written, underlined once, "Sharp head for numbers." I took the clipboard. I did not say anything. I turned and waved at him once. He was standing by the rental car with his hands in his jacket pockets. He was the only father in the parking lot who had brought a clipboard. He raised a hand. I went up the steps into Chase Hall. He drove the rental car back to Hartford that afternoon, returned it, and took an evening flight home. He told my mother, that night at the kitchen table, that the campus was nice enough. That was all he said. My mother told me, years later, that he had sat at the kitchen table for an hour after dinner without taking off his coat. I came home for 10 days the Christmas of 1996, an ensign in service dress blue, with the new aircrew insignia on my left chest. I had ordered a tailor at Air Station Mobile to take the blouse in half an inch at the waist because I was 22 and the standard fit hung on me like a curtain. I wore the blouse to dinner on Christmas Eve because I had to fly back to Mobile on the 26th. I sat down at the dining room table in my uniform. My father took one look at me and said, "Lucy, you look like a stewardess. Why do they make the girls' uniforms look like the girls who hand out peanuts?" He thought he was being funny. He always thought he was being funny. The way he said it told me he had said the sentence earlier, at the office, and gotten a laugh from somebody at the office. He was rehearsing his daughter for the office. My mother laughed at the table. Pippa, who was 19 and home from Ohio State and had a small framed photograph of a finance student named Ross Whitcomb on her dresser upstairs, laughed too. I ate the green bean casserole. I did not correct him. I had been an ensign in the United States Coast Guard for 4 months. I did not yet know how to be corrected by my father in front of the casserole, so I let him correct me instead. Pippa graduated from Ohio State in the spring of 1999. She brought Ross to dinner that summer. Ross had a gray suit and a soft handshake and a Cleveland Trust business card he had had printed for his summer internship. My father loved him on sight. My mother had loved him by the appetizer course. By the time the salad came, the family had a son. Pippa and Ross got engaged in October of 2000. They married at St. Dominic's in Shaker Heights on the second Saturday of June, 2001. The reception was at the country club. I wore service dress blue with the lieutenant's bars and my aircrew insignia. I had pulled 3 men out of the Gulf of Mexico in February of that year, on a Jayhawk crew out of Mobile, and the bars had been mailed to me by my squadron commander with a handwritten note. I was 27. The photographer lined up the family portrait by the rose garden at the side of the country club at 4 p.m, in late June light, with the bridesmaids in dusty pink and Pippa in white and Ross in a charcoal morning coat. My mother appeared at my elbow as the photographer was setting his light meter. She put her hand on my forearm. She said gently, "Just the family portrait, honey. We can do one with you later. The colors." I looked at her. I looked at the photographer. I looked at the bridesmaids, who were all looking somewhere else. I stepped out of the frame. The photographer counted 3. The shutter clicked. The photograph that hung in my parents' dining room for the next 24 years is a photograph of my mother and my father and my sister and her new husband, smiling in dusty pink and charcoal in late June light with a small empty space at the left edge of the frame where I should have been. My father found me in the receiving line afterward. He had a glass of champagne in one hand and a small plate of crab puffs in the other. He looked at me in the dress blue. He said, "Lucy, the costume." He winked, the way he winked when he made a joke at the hardware store regional managers meeting. I did not say anything. I had stood watch on a 41-footer in the Gulf of Mexico that February. I had pulled 3 men out of the water. The lieutenant's bars on my collar had been mailed to me with a handwritten note from a squadron commander who had been a Coast Guard rescue swimmer in Beirut. My mother called it a costume because she thought the colors did not match the bridesmaids' dresses. My father called it a costume because he thought he was being funny. I went home to Mobile on Sunday morning. I sat in my apartment in Mobile that night with the dress blue blouse hung over the back of a kitchen chair and looked at the lieutenant's bars on the collar and thought, for the first time, that I had a choice about how much my family knew about my career. I made the choice in that apartment that night. The choice was to stop telling them. It was not the kind of decision a person makes once. It was the kind of decision a person remakes every Christmas Eve for the next 24 years. I made it for the first time in Mobile in June of 2001. I remade it the same way in Christmas of 2002 at Pippa and Ross's new house in Shaker Heights, when my father stood at the buffet and asked Ross in his real listening voice what a first-year associate at a commercial bank actually did in a day. He had never asked me in 7 years of uniform what I actually did in a day. I stood 10 feet away from the buffet that night with my plate. I watched my father lean forward to listen to Ross talk about treasury management. I watched my mother watch the 2 of them with the look she had used to watch the 2 of them at St. Dominic's the year before. I watched Pippa watch our parents watch her husband. The kitchen window behind the buffet was dark. The reflection in the window was a woman in a navy blue blouse with 2 lieutenant's bars on the collar, holding a plate of crab puffs, standing 10 feet behind her father, who was not turning around. I put on my coat. I went home early. I did the dishes I had carried back to the kitchen in my service dress blue, with the blouse off and hung on the back of a chair because I did not want to spill anything on it. My dress blue blouse, draped over the chair, had 8 ribbons on the left chest. Nobody at the dinner had asked me about any of them. Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. 07:45 hours. I parked in the flag spaces in the executive parking deck at the North Gatehouse of the National Security Agency at Fort Meade, Maryland. And I took my cover off the passenger seat. And I walked the long carpeted corridor from the flag deck to the visitor lobby. I was in service dress blue, single-breasted, with the shoulder boards of a Rear Admiral, lower half of the United States Coast Guard. I had earned the 2nd stripe in March of the previous year. The shoulder boards were still new enough that I could feel the corners of the embroidered anchor against my collarbone when I turned my head. The Coast Guard cryptologist insignia was above my left chest ribbons. The ribbons were anchored by the Defense Superior Service Medal. My access badge hung on a black lanyard around my neck. I never wanted to be the kind of officer who likes being recognized. I had spent 29 years inside rooms where nobody is supposed to know your name. The reveal that morning was not something I orchestrated. The reveal was the building. 08:10 hours. The visitor lobby. The lobby is the size of a small bus station, with a polished slate floor and a wall of tall, east-facing glass that runs from the floor to the 2nd-story balcony. The light at 8:10 in late April is the best light in the building. It cuts across the slate in long, warm planks. I crossed the lobby on a diagonal from the side corridor toward the bank of executive elevators that go to the leadership floors. The bank of executive elevators is to the right of the visitor turnstiles, behind a low rope line and a small standing sign that reads, "Authorized personnel only." There were 4 people in the lobby at that hour. Major Trent Ferraro, U.S. Army, the lobby floor supervisor, at his desk by the security cordon in his Army service uniform with the gold leaf on his shoulders. 2 civilian contractors in business casual sitting on the long bench by the east glass, waiting to be escorted. And Captain Bryce Hollander, U.S. Army Cyber Corps, 27 years old, 5 months into a joint duty rotation, standing 2 paces from the executive elevators in his Army service uniform on a phone call. He saw me cross. He saw a blonde woman in a dark blue blouse he did not recognize the rank on, walking, in his peripheral vision toward the rope line that said, "Authorized personnel only." He decided in the half-second a man decides these things, what he was looking at. He decided I was lost. He stepped in front of the executive elevator. He lowered his phone. He smirked. He spoke loud enough for the lobby to hear. "Whoa, sweetheart, wrong elevator. This one's for cleared personnel only. Visitor elevators are over there." He gestured, with the hand that was not holding his phone, toward the visitor turnstile bank to the south. I did not say anything. I walked the last 3 steps to the turnstile reader. I lifted my badge on its lanyard. I tapped the badge against the reader. The reader cycled red, then amber. The small 4-inch screen flashed a single line of text in capitals. Cutter 2, priority override. Dear CGCG/J Cell. The line was large enough for Hollander, 6 feet away from the reader, to read. He thought he was being polite. He thought he was helping. I have learned, over 29 years in uniform, that a man being polite at a woman in a hallway is one of the most insulting things a man can do, and he never knows it. It is the smallest thing. A light cycling from one color to another, a line of text on a 4-inch screen. But there are people in any lobby who know what those words mean, and there are people who do not. And that morning, the difference walked across the lobby like a slow tide. Major Ferraro looked up from his desk 5 steps away. He saw the screen. He stood. He took a half step toward the turnstile and then stopped himself because he did not want to make a scene in front of a flag officer. He nodded once at me. "Ma'am. Good morning, ma'am." I gave him a small nod. "Major." The leadership elevator behind the turnstile chimed. The doors opened. Vice Admiral Roland Mercier, United States Coast Guard, Deputy Director for National Intelligence, the Senior Coast Guard Flag Officer at the National Security Agency, call sign Cutter 1, stepped out with a brown folder under his arm. He was in service dress blue with 3 broad gold stripes on each sleeve. He had been the man who pinned my flag in March of 2024 in a small ceremony in the Coast Guard Cryptologic Group's conference room on the 7th floor. He saw me at the turnstile. He saw Hollander, still standing in front of the executive elevator with his phone half raised. His face did the thing flag officers' faces do when they decide what kind of moment this is going to be. He decided it would be a quiet one. Admiral Tyndall, the director's been waiting. We've moved the brief to the SCIF on 12. Sir! Mercier looked past me, not unkindly. Captain, you can move. Hollander's hand went up to his cover. The cover was in his other hand because he was indoors. He realized this an instant after he reached for it. He brought his hand back down. He said, Sir, ma'am, He stopped. I passed him without slowing. Mercier passed him without looking at him. The turnstile rotated. The leadership elevator doors closed on Mercier and me. The lobby was quiet for a beat and then noisy again because lobbies are noisy. We rode up to 12. Mercier did not look at me. He looked at the floor display. When the doors opened on 12, he said, in his level voice, I'll have Ferraro send a note to the J staff. I said, Thank you, sir. He said, It was the screen, wasn't it? He read the screen. I said, He read the screen. Mercier nodded once. We walked into the SCIF. I chaired the brief. I returned 3 calls. I signed the duty log. I did not think about Hollander again until lunch. At 1200, I went down to the cafeteria on level 2 and ate a Caesar salad in the corner booth where the cryptologic group eats. Major Ferraro came by with a tray. He did not sit. He stood at the end of the booth with the tray balanced on his forearm. He said quietly, Ma'am, I want to apologize for the lobby this morning. I should have moved sooner. I told him there was nothing to apologize for. I meant it. He nodded. He said, I've kicked it up to the J staff. The captain is going to have a conversation with his raider this afternoon. I looked up from the salad. Major, make sure the conversation is corrective, not punitive. He didn't know what he didn't know. Yes, ma'am. I do not believe in destroying young officers for being ignorant. I believe in correcting them. The Coast Guard taught me that. The Coast Guard that my father called the boat boys. At 1400, Lieutenant Colonel Holzer from the J staff called my secure line. He apologized formally on behalf of the Joint Command. He told me Captain Hollander's joint duty tour would be reviewed at the end of the month, that the raider would be counseled, and that Hollander would receive a formal remediation under the Joint Command's Professional Standards Program. I listened. I thanked him. I asked the one question I had earned the right to ask. Colonel, I would like the remediation to be a learning intervention, not a career-ending event. I would like to see his next officer evaluation report. I want to know if he learned. Ma'am, we can arrange that. Thank you. I drove home on Route 175 at 1830, east through Crofton, south on Route 2 towards Severna Park. The cherry trees were out along the median. I thought about the screen flashing Cutter 2. I thought about my father in the kitchen in March of 1989. I thought about Pippa at 12, laughing at the boat boys. I thought about the photograph I had sent home from Air Station Mobile in 1996, the one with the Jayhawk behind me on the apron, that my mother had never put on the mantel. I sat on my back porch at 2200 with a glass of seltzer. The townhouse backs onto a small wooded easement, and the spring frogs were out. I called Greta Ainsworth on her cabin landline. She picked up on the second ring. We had been roommates at the academy in 1992. She had retired 3 years before to a cabin on Cobscook Bay in Maine, where the only reliable phone is the wall phone in her kitchen. I told her the whole thing in 7 sentences. Greta laughed once, a soft laugh, and then stopped. Lucy, he didn't see your shoulder boards because he wasn't looking. That's not new. You've been in rooms where men weren't looking for 30 years. I know. What's bothering you isn't him. I did not answer for a moment. It's Wallace, Greta said. It's Wallace. Greta has known me since I was 18. She knows the names of my parents. She knows what my father said at the kitchen table in 1989. She knows because I told her in 1993 after a 4-mile run, and she has never forgotten it. That is what a friend is. A person who knows the sentence that made you a stranger in your own kitchen, and who keeps that sentence for you. The way you keep a small key in a small drawer. I stayed on the porch for another hour after Greta and I hung up. The seltzer went flat. The frogs got louder. I scrolled, on my phone, to the photograph I keep at the very top of my favorites, the one from Air Station Mobile in 1996. Me at 22, in flight suit, in front of an HH-60 Jayhawk with the Mobile Bay water tower in the background. I had sent the print home in a manila envelope that fall. My mother had written me a thank you note. The note had said the photograph was nice. She had put the print in a drawer in the dining room hutch. She had never framed it. I had visited the dining room twice a year since, and the print had never moved out of the drawer. The mantel had Pippa's wedding picture. The mantel had Pippa and Ross's Christmas portraits. The mantel had Ross's mother at her 90th birthday. The mantel did not have a Jayhawk. I made a decision on the porch that night. It was not a dramatic decision. I did not stand up. I did not pour out the seltzer. The decision came the way most decisions come to me, which is in the form of an old idea I had already had 10 times and had not acted on. The decision was to stop protecting my family from the truth of my career. They had been protected from it for 24 years. The protection had not made them happier. It had only made them quieter about a daughter they did not know. I went to bed at 23:40. I slept badly. I got up at 0500 and made coffee. I sat at the kitchen island with the coffee and a yellow legal pad and made a list. The list had 3 items. The first item was to call the Coast Guard Public Affairs Office and accept the Defense News profile requests they had been forwarding me for 6 months. The second item was to call Pippa. The third item was to call my parents. I called Public Affairs at 0800. The lieutenant who took my call sounded surprised. I had been declining the profile since October. I told her I had changed my mind. She said the reporter would be in touch within the week. I thanked her. I hung up. I called Pippa at 10. Pippa picked up between showings. I could hear her car running in the background and her keys in her hand. I told her I was going to be in a magazine. She said in her real estate voice, "What magazine, like Real Simple?" I said, "Defense News, it runs in October." She was quiet for a long moment. The car engine ticked over in the background. She turned the engine off. "Defense News, like the people who cover the Pentagon." "Yes." "Lucy, are you, important?" I did not answer right away. I thought about the question. I thought about my sister, who had been my sister for 48 years, asking me if I was important. I thought about the answer. "Yes." She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, Okay, Lucy. I want to read it. Send it to me when you get it." "I will." I called my parents at 1700. My mother picked up. I told her I was going to be in Defense News. She said, "Is that a website?" I said it was a publication. She said she would tell Wallace. I waited at the kitchen island. Wallace got on the line 10 minutes later. He sounded tired. He sounded the way he sounds when he does not know what he's being told. "Defense News, so that's what, a trade paper?" "It's the paper for what I do, Dad. It's the paper for the Department of Defense." Will they pay you?" "No." "Okay, well, send me a copy." He asked if they would pay me. I do not say that to make him sound cruel. I say it because that is the only language he had for being impressed. My father, who taught me to read a balance sheet in 1984, asked me if the magazine that was going to put my career on its cover would pay me. It was the only way he knew to take it seriously. Cash in the till, numbers on the line, a receipt at the bottom of the page. He had been keeping a hardware store ledger for 40 years, and what he was telling me, in the only way he could, was that he wanted the magazine to be real. The Defense News reporter came down to Fort Meade on the 3rd Thursday in April. She was a former Navy public affairs officer who had moved to journalism in 2019, and she had done her homework. She had read the unclassified portions of every Coast Guard Cryptologic Group annual report from 2015 to 2024. She asked me about Mobile in 1996. She asked me about Pensacola in 2000. She asked me about the first NSA tour. She did not ask me what my parents thought. I would have answered the question if she had asked it. I'm glad she did not. The photographer came on Thursday afternoon. He was a contracted civilian in a tan jacket and a Nikon strap. He asked me where I wanted to stand for the photograph. I pointed at the visitor turnstile in the main lobby. He did not understand. He suggested the wall of stars at the entrance to the executive corridor. I said no. I said the turnstile. He looked at the turnstile. He shrugged. He set up the light. The photograph he took is the photograph that ran on the cover of Defense News on the 3rd Wednesday of October. I am in service dress blue. The badge on its lanyard is at the center of my chest. The reader screen is visible at the right edge of the frame. The screen is dark because there is no badge against it. The screen in the photograph is just a small black rectangle waiting for the next reader to come. Ross Whitcomb has a cousin who works at a defense contractor in Crystal City. The cousin saw a draft of the article through a colleague at the contractor on the Friday before the run date. He texted Ross. Ross forwarded the screenshot to Pippa. Pippa stared at the screenshot in her car in the Whole Foods parking lot in Beechwood. She read the subhead twice. The subhead read, Rear Admiral Lucy Tyndall has been a quiet architect of Coast Guard maritime signals intelligence for 2 decades. At NSA Fort Meade, she runs the only Coast Guard flag-level fusion cell. She forwarded the screenshot to my mother. My mother read the screenshot at the kitchen table in Old Brooklyn. She was alone. She had a cup of tea in front of her. She read the subhead. She looked at the small photograph at the top of the screenshot. She picked up her phone. She called Pippa. Pip, have you read this? I'm reading it now. Pip, I had no idea. Did you have any idea? Pippa, in her car in the Whole Foods parking lot in Beechwood, holding the screenshot of her older sister's career, with the November Cleveland sky going gray outside the windshield, did not answer for a moment. No, Mom, I didn't. The summer of 2025 passed quietly. The remediation of Captain Hollander began the first Monday in June, in a small office on the 3rd floor of the J Staff Annex, with a Coast Guard mentor named Commander Yvette Cordero. Commander Cordero was 41, a Mustang officer who had come up through the enlisted ranks as a yeoman before commissioning at 28, and she had a particular gift for the look she could give a young Army captain across a desk. She walked Hollander through the Coast Guard officer rank structure on the first day. She walked him through the fusion cell mission on the second day. On the third day, she set a Coast Guard service dress blue blouse on her desk and made him sit there for 45 minutes while she explained the shoulder boards, the cuff stripes, the warfare insignia, and the chest device of a cryptologic warfare officer. He took notes. He asked questions in the second hour. He apologized to her on the last day of the 3rd week. He said he wanted to write a letter to Rear Admiral Tyndall. Commander Cordero looked at him for a long moment. She said, Captain, the Admiral does not need your letter. The Admiral needs you not to do it again. To anyone. He said, Yes, ma'am. She made him write the letter anyway. She made him send it to her, not to me. She read it once, in her office, on a Friday afternoon, and she walked the page out to the burn barrel behind the annex and dropped it in. The barrel was the 3rd lesson. He understood the 3rd lesson. By the end of the 6-week embed, he had stopped reaching for his phone in hallways. He had started looking at shoulder boards. He had asked Commander Cordero in their last conversation what cryptologic warfare officers actually did. She told him the unclassified part. He listened. He took the train back to his apartment in Odenton that Friday night and sat on the small balcony with a cup of black coffee that had gone cold an hour before. He thought about the lobby in April. He thought about the woman in the dark blue blouse he had not bothered to look at. He thought about the smirk he had heard the next morning in the recording of his own voice that his raider had played for him in the raider's office on Maple Street. The recording was an audio file the lobby cameras had captured. The smirk had been very clear. He had not known, until he heard it, that his voice did that. He has not done it since. I do not know that for a fact. I know that Commander Cordero would have told me if he had. My mother sat at the kitchen table with the printed PDF of the Defense News draft article on a striped placemat for most of July. She read it 4 times. She highlighted things. She looked up cryptologic and fusion cell and Rear Admiral lower half. She watched 2 YouTube videos about Coast Guard helicopter rescues. My father came in for coffee on a Saturday morning in late July and saw the article on the placemat. He said, "She finally got the magazine." My mother said, "Wally, sit down. I want to talk about Lucy." She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She did the thing she had done at parish council meetings for 30 years, which is to set down the agenda calmly and ask the difficult question first. Pippa drove from Shaker Heights to Old Brooklyn on the 2nd Saturday of August. She sat in the kitchen across from my mother with 2 cups of coffee. They talked for 2 hours. My mother cried twice. Pippa cried once. They talked about the wedding photograph from 1996 in the lieutenant's bars and the costume joke and the dinner in 2002 and the Christmases, and the way my father had asked Ross about treasury management for 13 years and had never asked his daughter about Cutter 2. My father stayed in the basement workshop during the entire conversation. He could hear them through the floor vent above the workbench. He did not come up. He turned the radio in the basement up to a level that allowed him to hear the conversation, but not respond to it. He sat at the workbench and pretended to oil a pair of pliers for an hour and 20 minutes. In September, he took out the ledger. He opened it to 1989. He read the entries in his own handwriting. Lucy swim team fees, $42. Lucy field trip, $18. He turned to the entries from the summer of 1992. He had written, in pencil, drove L to CGA, Gas Pennsylvania Turnpike, $24. Lunch at the Sheets outside Bedford, $11. He looked at the entries for a long time. He closed the ledger. He went upstairs. My father is not a man who weeps. My father is a man who counts. He has counted my whole life. He has been keeping the ledger of me since I was 2. He just never read the totals. Defense News published the profile on the 3rd Wednesday of October. The cover photograph was me at the lobby turnstile. The subhead read, Coast Guard's quiet architect of maritime signals intelligence. Pippa bought 6 copies at a Books-A-Million in Beechwood. She mailed one to my mother, one to my father, one to Ross's cousin in Crystal City, one to her own house, one to me, and she kept one. My mother framed the cover in a thin black frame she bought at the Michaels on Brook Park Road. She put the frame on the mantel in the living room next to Pippa's wedding portrait from 2001. The mantel finally had both daughters on it. The mantel had been there my whole life. It had taken until October of 2025 for both daughters to be on it. I am not bitter about the timing. I am grateful for the mantel. Pippa drove down to Maryland the second week of November. She came alone. She did not bring Ross. Ross asked her, the night before she left, if everything was all right. She said yes. He asked her why she was going alone then. She said, because I owe my sister a weekend where it's about her and not about your family. I have done 24 Thanksgivings with your mother. I am going to give my sister 48 hours. My mother flew in on the Friday morning. It was her first solo flight in 9 years. She landed at BWY on the 11 o'clock from Cleveland Hopkins. I met her at baggage claim in jeans and a black field coat with a U.S. Coast Guard ball cap I had not worn outside the house in 3 years. She saw me from across the carousel. She walked to me. She put her arms around me and held me for longer than she had held me since the Christmas of 1996. She said, into my coat collar, your father wanted to come. He didn't think he could. I said, I know, Mom. We drove to Severna Park. We had lunch at the small place on Ritchie Highway, where the cryptologic group eats on Saturday mornings. My mother sat in the booth with her purse on her lap. She took the menu off the table and read it twice before she ordered a tuna sandwich. She said, Lucy, the article. I read it 4 times. Pip read it. Your father read it. We didn't know what half of it meant. I said, I know, Mom. She said, we should have known. I am sorry we didn't know. I said, it is okay, Mom. We went back to the townhouse in the afternoon. My mother sat on the couch and looked at the framed photographs on the credenza. The Jayhawk at Mobile in 1996, the one that had lived in the dining room drawer for 29 years. Greta and me in front of Chase Hall in 1993. My LCDR pinning at the Coast Guard Cryptologic Group in 2006. The flag pinning with Vice Admiral Mercier in March of 2024. She picked up the flag pinning photograph. She held it. She looked at it for a long time. Lucy, I missed this. Mom, I missed it. Your father missed it. We missed it on purpose. We did not understand it was a thing to be at. Mom, I am sorry. Pippa drove up from Shaker Heights on Saturday morning with a cardboard box of things from the old Brooklyn attic. She put the box on the kitchen counter. Inside were my swim team medals from 1987 through 1991, the Berea High School yearbook from 1992, 3 Coast Guard recruiter brochures I thought I had hidden in 1989, a manila envelope marked in my mother's hand. Lucy, letters. The letters were the letters I had sent home from the academy, from Mobile, from Pensacola, from my first NSA tour. There were 41 letters. My mother had kept every one. In the afternoon, I drove the 2 of them to the Fort Meade Visitor Center. We parked in the visitors' lot. I did not take them inside the building. I took them as close as the public guidance allows, to the small lawn outside the visitor center, with the perimeter fence behind us and the 7th floor windows visible above the trees to the east. I pointed at the 7th floor windows. I told them that the work I do has names I cannot tell them. I told them what I could. I told them that the building was the building, and that I walked into it every morning, and that I was responsible for the things that happened inside it. My mother listened. Pippa listened. Pippa cried once. My mother did not. There is a moment a parent figures out that their child became a person without their permission. My mother had that moment in the visitor parking lot at Fort Meade in November. She did not say anything. She put her hand on the small of my back, the way you do for a child who's about to cross a street. We went back to the townhouse for dinner. My mother called my father after the dishes. She put him on speaker on my kitchen counter. He sounded tired. He asked her how the trip was going. She said, "Wally, I think we should have come a long time ago." He was quiet. I stood at the kitchen island with Pippa. Pippa put her hand on my wrist. My father cleared his throat. "Lucy, tell your mother to put me on speaker." "You're on, Wally," my mother said. "Lucy, the kitchen, at Christmas. I want to talk." "Okay, Dad." December opened cold in Maryland. The first week of December, on a Wednesday afternoon, I read Captain Hollander's officer evaluation report on my secure terminal at NSA. The rater wrote that Captain Hollander had undertaken the joint duty remediation with seriousness and had demonstrated improved judgment under supervision. The senior rater wrote that Captain Hollander's professional conduct in interactions with senior officers across services had been observed and corrected. I read the closing paragraph twice. I opened the notes file I keep on a separate, lower side terminal. I wrote a single sentence. "Watch this one, he may turn into something." I do not need every young man who insults me in a hallway to be ruined. The Coast Guard taught me that the point of correction is correction. I have been corrected myself more than once. I would not be here without it. On the 5th of December, the Defense News Profile was named a finalist for a small industry feature award. Pippa screenshotted the announcement and texted it to me with a single red heart. I texted her a single thumbs up. Pippa and I had not texted hearts and thumbs to each other in 20 years. The little glyphs sat on my phone screen on the train 2 weeks later. I looked at them more than once. On the 8th of December, my father went into the basement workshop after dinner with the closed ledger on the bench beside him and a fresh sheet of yellow legal pad in front of him. He wrote the date at the top, 12/8/25. He wrote, "Questions for Lucy," under the date. He wrote 3 questions. The first was, "What does Cutter 2 mean?" The second was, "Why didn't you tell me at the Christmas dinner in 2002? The third was, "Did I ever tell you I was proud?" He stopped at the third question. He did not write a fourth that day. He folded the yellow page into thirds. He put the folded page in the breast pocket of his work shirt. He went upstairs. He did not tell my mother what he had written. He carried the page in that pocket for 12 days. He washed 2 shirts in the meantime and remembered to take the page out and put it on the bedroom dresser before he started the wash. He brought the page back into the pocket the morning the shirt came out of the dryer. He was careful with the page. He treated the page the way he treated the canceled deposit slips from 1980 in the manila envelope in the basement. He treated the page like a receipt for something he was not sure he had paid for yet. On the 10th of December, Pippa told Ross she was going to Cleveland alone for Christmas. Ross asked if everything was all right. Pippa said yes. Ross asked her why she was going alone then. Pippa said, "Because she let me be wrong for 24 of them. I do not want 25. I took the Amtrak on the 20th of December. The early train from BWI to Cleveland is the 8:46 departure, 11 hours through Pittsburgh and the Mahoning Valley, with the Capital Limited handing off to the regional in Cleveland a little after sundown. I take the train when I want my secure phone to be turned off for 36 hours, and the train is the easiest way to enforce 36 hours of nothing. I watch the freight yards in Pittsburgh from the window. I thought about Greta on Cobscook Bay. I thought about Hollander somewhere in the building, learning. I thought about a kitchen in Old Brooklyn I had not slept in for 14 years. My father met me at the curb at the Cleveland station in the beige Ford Taurus he has driven for 15 years. He had been at the station for 40 minutes when the regional pulled in. He had parked the Taurus, in defiance of the no parking sign, 6 feet from the curb. He had waited. He had carried the folded yellow page in his pocket the whole time. He had taken it out twice while he waited, in the cold, and looked at the 3 questions in his neat ledger hand. He had folded the page back into thirds and put it back in his pocket both times. He had his coat zipped to the neck. He had his ball cap pulled down. He raised his hand the way he raised his hand at the public pool on Pearl Road in 1983. I walked across the curb with my duffel on my shoulder and my cover under my arm, and I put both in the back seat. I sat in the passenger seat. He started the engine. He put his hand on the wheel. He looked at me. He did not say anything for a moment. He just looked. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Lucy." He drove me home through the empty Cleveland streets. The salt trucks had been by. The lights were on at St. Leo the Great. He did not turn on the radio. He drove with both hands on the wheel. Christmas Eve, the kitchen in Old Brooklyn, the same kitchen where I had laid the Coast Guard recruiter brochures on the table in March of 1989. My mother had put the Defense News cover on the wall over the breakfast nook in the same thin black frame she had bought at Michael's. Pippa pulled into the driveway at 4 p.m. with a tray of her annual lemon bars. My mother hugged her. She walked into the kitchen with the tray in her hands. I was at the counter in jeans and a cream sweater, helping my father stir cocoa for the four of us. The kitchen smelled like vanilla. After the lemon bars, after the cocoa, after a quiet hour of the four of us in the living room with the tree on and the radio on the Cleveland Classical station, I went upstairs to the guest room that used to be Pippa's. I came back down with a small, flat cardboard box. Inside the box was a pair of my current Coast Guard service dress blue shoulder boards, the broad gold stripe and the narrow stripe of a Rear Admiral, lower half. Each board was about 4 inches long. The gold was a little dull from a year of wear. I laid them on the kitchen counter near the lemon bars. My father picked one up. He held it in his hand. He turned it once. "Lucy, I want to read you something." He took the folded yellow legal page out of the breast pocket of his work shirt. "I made a list in the basement 2 weeks ago." "Okay, Dad." He unfolded the page. He smoothed it on the counter with the side of his hand. "First one, what does Cutter 2 mean?" I leaned on the counter across from him. "It means I am number 2 in a room where the number 1 is a Coast Guard Vice Admiral. Cutter 1 is his call sign. I am his deputy in a joint cell at NSA. Okay. Second one. Why didn't you tell me at the Christmas dinner in 2002? I looked at the shoulder board in his hand. I thought about how to answer. I told the truth. "Because you asked Ross what a banker did in a day, and you did not ask me. And I decided, that night, to stop telling you. I was wrong about that. I should have told you anyway. It was my job to tell you anyway." "I should have asked," he said. He did not look up from the shoulder board. Pippa stood in the kitchen doorway. She was holding her mug of cocoa in both hands. She said quietly, "Dad, read the third one." He looked at the page. He took a long breath. "Did I ever tell you I was proud?" I waited. I let the question be the question. "No, Dad, you didn't." He put the shoulder board down on the counter, carefully, the way you put down a small instrument you do not want to scratch. "I am. I have been. I did not know how to tell you. I should have learned," my mother said, very quietly from the table behind him. "Wally." He turned the shoulder board on the counter with one finger so the anchor was facing up. He did not look at me. "Lucy, I am sorry I called it the costume." He had carried that word, costume, around inside himself for 24 years. So had I. I had been waiting for him to give it back. I had not known I was waiting. The relief when he gave it back was a clean tide, the kind that comes in over flat sand. It does not make a sound, it just keeps coming, and the sand keeps disappearing under it, and eventually all of the things you were carrying are floating around your ankles, and you let them go. We ate the dinner. We laughed twice, then 4 times. My mother told a story about a parish council meeting in 1997, where the casserole rotation had been challenged by a new chairwoman, and my father laughed at the punchline the way he used to laugh at the buffet at the country club in 2001. After dinner, Pippa and I took our cocoa out to the back step. The yard was very cold. The neighbor's dog was barking, 2 yards over, the way that dog had been barking on Christmas Eve since 1990. Pippa pulled her coat tighter. She set her cocoa on the step. "I had no idea who you were. I had a sister for 48 years and I had no idea who she was. You know now. I am going to spend the rest of my life knowing." "Good. I would like that." We sat for a while. The dog kept barking. The kitchen light behind us put a long, warm rectangle on the yard. My mother and my father were inside, talking, in the same kitchen we had eaten in for 52 years. The light from the window was the same color as the light at the public pool on Pearl Road in 1983, when the lifeguard's whistle had to call me out of the deep end twice. I drank my cocoa. April 2026. I stood at the front of the auditorium at Chase Hall at the United States Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut, in service dress blue, and looked at the women of the class of 2029. They were 18 and 19. They had just finished swab summer 6 months before. Their backs were very straight. The seats in the front row were the same seats I had sat in as a swab in the summer of 1992. The lights were the same. The smell of the building, of old wood and chlorine from the pool on the lower deck, was the same. I told them what I had not been told. I told them the story of my father at the kitchen table in Cleveland in March of 1989. I told them about the brochures and the boat boys and the years of letters my mother had kept and never read out loud. I told them about the Tuesday morning in April of 2025 and the badge and the screen and the Vice Admiral in the leadership elevator. I did not tell them the part about my father in the kitchen in December. That part is not for the auditorium. That part is for the porch. I want to tell you something nobody told me at the swab summer line in 1992. Nobody's going to recognize you for what you are when you start. The recognition comes later. The work has to come first. Do not wait for the recognition. Do the work. The recognition is going to find you in a hallway one Tuesday morning when you least expect it. It is going to find you because you will have spent 30 years getting good at something. Get good at something. Do not wait. I walked the seawall after the talk in my overcoat with my cover under my arm. The harbor was gray. The November water of Long Island Sound was the dark green of Lake Erie in March. A 45-foot response boat passed through the channel slowly. I raised a hand to the coxswain. The coxswain, a young petty officer second class with the hood of her float coat down around her neck, raised a hand back. The lighthouse came on. If you ever have to walk into a building where nobody's looking for you, the trick is not to spend the rest of your life waiting to be seen. The trick is to make the building know you, one Tuesday morning at a time. The recognition comes. It just does not come on the schedule you wanted. And when it comes, you let it come quietly. Because the people who matter were never going to need the elevator scene. They were going to need the kitchen scene. And the kitchen scene comes if you stay in the work. If you have ever had a father who never quite saw you, who measured you in the wrong column, and who took 30 years to ask the right question, I would love to hear your story in the comments. Did your moment ever come, or are you still waiting for the kitchen scene? Did your family find out who you really were on their own, or did you have to tell them? And if any of this hit somewhere familiar, hit subscribe.